YouTube, and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily cover Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. And of course, I have a Patreon and Discord, more info at the end of the video. So you may be wondering why I'm appearing face-to-face, or as close as face-to-face as YouTube gets these days. And that's because I have a little bit of a different video today. So I'm going to throw it over to my guest, Nico DeGaio. Nico?
Hey, what's up? I'm Nico DeGaio, and I'm going to be on Prime Productions today. Very excited. I'm a content creator. I started doing a lot of D&D stuff, and then I moved to doing a lot of Daggerheart stuff too now, because I'm one of those people who was playing D&D and was like, boy, I really like the roleplay aspect. And then I was like, wow, there's like a lot of crap I need to keep in mind when I'm trying to like just have a good time, which is part of why I've largely shifted channel content. But I also do. I'm a professional event host. I do burlesque shows. I also do a lot of actual play stuff, both D&D and Daggerheart. And I'm a professional voice actor. I'm in video games like Honkai Star Rail and stuff like that. So hit me up if you ever want to collaborate or work together.
That's great. I forgot that you were a professional voice actor, which is actually germane to what we're doing today. So today, I thought I would explain to Nico, and thus the audience, a really interesting or a really interesting world concept for any role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Daggerheart, what have you, and that is Critical Role's Campaign 4. So, Nico, have you seen anything about Critical Role's Campaign 4 Campaign World?
No.
All right, so I'm going to explain it to Nico, and thus you guys and Nico can hopefully answer the questions that you would have, and we can talk about how you could turn this campaign world into your own. I think it would be very fun. So, just so that we're all on the same page, if you don't know, Critical Role is an actual play series on YouTube and on Twitch where a bunch of actual professional voice actors play Dungeons and Dragons, and they occasionally play other games. Sorry. They have 4 campaigns, 3 that they finished, and they're working on their 4th. So here's the deal. The first 3 campaigns were run by a guy named Matt Mercer, who is another professional voice actor. He's actually the guy who voiced Minsk in Baldur's Gate 3, in addition to so many other things. I think he's Vincent in the Final Fantasy VII remake as well. And he made his world of Exandria, which was a fairly standard world for, medieval European fantasy. In Campaign 4, he has stepped down as Game Master and is actually a player, and a guy named Brennan Lee Mulligan is running Campaign 4. If you don't know who Brennan Lee Mulligan is, he does like professional D&D stuff. He's also just like an immensely funny improv comedian. He's on the show Game Changers. I don't know if you've ever seen that, Nico.
Yeah, I have. I
Yeah.
have.
So he is running this very unique version of a world, and I wanted to discuss it and bring it to you guys so that you could maybe make a version of the world yourself, because I thought it was really interesting and it's very politically relevant in these days. So I thought I'd get started. Nico, please interrupt me if you have any questions. I've done as much research as I can. I don't guarantee that I have all the answers. And of course, Campaign 4 is still going on, so we don't have all of the answers yet already. But, interrupt me and I will see if I can answer any questions for you.
Sure. And as a disclaimer to anybody watching this, Cyprime hit me up and explicitly told me they want me to have the perspective of an audience member who doesn't know what's going on at all. So I have done the opposite and actively avoided doing any research. In fact, I would say that I am more familiar with Brendan Lee Mulligan as a comedian for Dropout TV, and then before that, when it was because it used to be College Humor as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, Brendan Lee Mulligan is primarily a comedian who was like, by the way, other theater kids, I also play D&D, and then is one of those theater kids who brought kind of D&D to other crowds. And I think it's really ironic that they are now doing the most D&D public project that exists now. And for all the years that I, as like an improv comedian, or the way that I ran D&D, got told that I was an idiot for running it this way, it's very ironic to see a professional comedian do the same thing, and then everyone goes, "This is mind breaking. He's thinking outside of the bun here. This is some Taco Bell stuff going on." And I'm like, okay, all right. But anyway, I digress. I digress. Putting the bitterness away.
So, just to let everybody know, a couple of things. One, I understand that some people don't like Matt Mercer. I understand that some people don't like Brendan Lee Mulligan. I'm not talking for or against them. I'm just talking about the campaign setting. So if you have a hatred for Brendan Lee Mulligan for whatever reason, don't worry. This is the last we're going to talk about him specifically.
Also, anything that Brennan Lee Mulligan or Matt Mercer do at their tables, uh, you're not on their payroll. You can just play differently.
Exactly. Perfect. All right, so Brennan Lee Mulligan's world in Campaign 4 is called Aramon. And we know that at the dawn of time in Aramon, Aramon had a few, like, eternal creatures living there. They had fae, demons, and primordials, who I think are elementals, but I'm not sure on that. Anyway, the fae came to this world from a fae realm. The demons came from a demon realm, which was existent without gods or anything like that. And then, at some point in time, 7 godlike beings known as the Shapers appeared. They're gods. They're also called Shapers. They kind of use that term independent or interchangeably. And the Shapers created mortals. And again, this is another part that I think is a little bit iffy. I think the Shapers created one mortal. I think the Shapers created one mortal race for each Shaper. So I think, like, there's a halfling god, there's for sure an elf god, there's for sure an orc god, but I think it was one mortal race per Shaper.
I don't know.
Yeah. I I don't think that has technically been revealed or not, but we do know that there was at least one orc shaper and one elf shaper, and probably also a halfling shaper. We don't know. Shapers banned all forms of worship other than worship to them. So, for example, Druidism had to be practiced underground and in secret. Nobody knows why they banned it. They could have just been really, really arrogant. There could have been a reason for it. Again, we're not terribly far into campaign 4, so we don't know yet. So time passes, and these civilizations rose and some fell, and several families became very powerful in the world. House Halavar became a fairly corrupt head of the Church of the God of Light in one particular nation, and House Taconis became kind of in bed with the God of Death, and he favored them so much that he basically blessed their bloodline with shadow necromancy magic and basically made many of them sorcerers, shadow necromancy kind of sorcerers. Then came something called the Shapers' War. Around 70-ish years before the current timeline of the campaign, the orcs just kind of became fed up with their god. So their god was the god of warfare and suffering, and basically he demanded eternal suffering because god of suffering, right? Now the orcs, yeah, the orcs didn't like that because not only did they have to suffer in the mortal realm, but when they died, they went to his special afterlife, which was filled with, you guessed it, more suffering.
Who would have thought? That's a curveball.
I was blown away. So, because they were also created by the god of war, they were really good at making weapons, and they crafted several powerful weapons called the pariah blades. The pariah blades that were designed to kill a god, and then they killed their god. Turns out this was a bad thing, kind of, because all of the other gods sided with the slain orc god over the other mortals. Why they sided, we're not exactly sure. Prevailing theory is that they were like, oh, mortals can kill shapers. Oh, that will not do. No, no, no. We have to shut that down right now. But whatever other reasons they could have had. And so they basically declare war on the mortals that were rebelling. A whole bunch of mortals saw their gods like trying to commit effectively genocide and were like, no, you're not supposed to do that. And it turned into basically a world war of mortals versus the gods. And when all was said and done, all 7 of the Shapers were killed.
Oh no.
It is important to note that some mortals sided with the gods. For example, House Halavar, those people, the corrupt people who were the Church of Light people, they sided with the gods because they were like, all of their political power was from doing church stuff to their god, and their house fell pretty far. Also, of course, House Deconus, who were in bed with the god of death, they also sided with the god of death. They were pretty bummed when he lost. Um, at this point, something else I need to mention happens. The gods created not just mortals, but they created divine servants, which were essentially angels. They're called celestials, I believe, but they were servants of the Shapers. And without their gods to control them, they basically went mad and feral. And they just started going crazy, attacking everything.
As it happens. As it happens.
Yeah, it's bad. Then, with the gods slain, other systems of power were allowed to flourish. So Druidism saw a resurgence, as did D&D style warlocks, which would be like Pathfinder witches or oracles. Um, 5 of the formerly powerful houses, basically after the Shapers' War, started immediately into triage mode to keep their political power. Um, this includes House Halavar and House Deconus, but also the 3 other houses that fell were desperately trying to claw back power. In the campaign so far, we know the most about Halavar and Deconus. That's why I'm focusing on them. But there were 3 others that kind of managed to claw their way back into power. So the game starts in the Orcish city of Dol Machir, and basically this is the city where the Orcish god was slain, and they set up a sort of revolutionary council, which is basically a government to keep things running while they were figuring out what to do. And sorry, it was ostensibly set up by the people and for the people. But the 5 sundered houses slowly began using politics and corruption to take over the council. And in the modern timeline, the city is basically run by the 5 houses, and the Revolutionary Council is basically just rubber stamping their stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not good. So Dol Machir has a group of wizard police called the Arcane Marshals. I need to front load that because we're going to talk about them in a second. Anyway, House Halavar captured a feral celestial, and this is where some of the crazy political stuff happens. So, House Halavar has set up a new religion that just kind of worships the concept of light, called the Candescent Creed. It's supposed to be a replacement for religion for people that need religion, and supposedly it does provide like divine power. But it is all a farce. It is a lie. They captured a celestial, one of those angel creatures, and is basically its blood and sweat and tears are like weird magic light substance. And they can use that to kind of make a facsimile of divine magic. And they also basically used that to uh, in a ritual to create a wish spell that allowed the head of House Halavar to have a child, and he is essentially an Asmar, a part celestial, and so they also have celestial bloodline sorcerers, or celestial-ish bloodline sorcerers. I think the player character who's a House Halavar character, I think he's technically not a celestial bloodline sorcerer, but he's something close. So on the other end, House Ticonus has started curtailing magic in the city and is basically trying to destroy the Wizard Academy in the city so that they are the only ones with arcane power. They are taking over the arcane enforcers, the arcane marshals, They
Mhm.
technically haven't gotten rid of the arcane marshals yet, but they've basically replaced themselves as the arcane marshals, like logistics and payroll and like back end house sort of stuff. So they basically control the arcane marshals now, and it's pretty obvious that they're going to get rid of the arcane marshals as soon as they find a way to have wizard police that are loyal to them.
Oh, wow. Now I get why you were like, "Oh, this is, like, really relevant
Yeah.
considering the real world
Uh,
politics."
yeah.
Okay, I
So
get it
like
now.
the House Taconis, it's pretty obvious that they want to be the only ones with any arcane power. So they're like curtailing the wizard school and trying to kick out anybody in the wizard school who's not like super loyal to Taconis. They basically threatened to murder one of the player characters who works at the wizard school and is not happy about this. They just like were very close to basically saying, I'm going to murder you in cold blood, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. So yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing about the campaign setting is in the aftermath of the Shapers falling, that 70 years ago, there were a series of kind of successor wars. The big one to worry about is the Falconers Rebellion, where an orc named Thiazi Fang led a rebellion against the Sundered Houses taking over Dolmakir. He was defeated, but he was given clemency, and he just kind of ran off to do his own thing because he wanted to fight against the houses even though his rebellion had failed. And like 15 years later or 12 years later, some number of years later, they recaptured him and publicly executed him. Only they basically reneged on their clemency, and they only did this as sort of political machinations in order to get all their ducks in a row for their final push to kind of take over the area. And they're taking over not just the city of Dalmakir, but like the whole wider area around Dalmakir.
Okay, I'm
And
gonna
that's, yeah, sorry.
I was like, I'm gonna pause you to do a little bit of like a listener's comprehension moment here,
Sure.
because I feel like there was like a lot
Yes.
thrown our way. So, okay, there is essentially a nation that has a ever progressing fascist government that is trying to, rather than having power spread throughout various branches, centralized, and by doing so are taking over certain agencies such as like the arcane marshals and stuff, so that they can then replace other police forces with ones that are directly loyal and unquestioning to House Draconis. Meanwhile, there is also another house that is manipulating the energy from a celestial being, like a giant human battery sort of situation, in order to feign divine magic and stuff. Um,
Very close.
and
I would not
yeah,
call the five Sundered Houses, and the five are very powerful. I think they're equally powerful. It's just we've seen the most of Halvar and Taconis. The other ones presumably have their own machinations going on. It's not so it's presented not as an authoritarian regime because the five houses currently have aligned goals, but it's very clear that as soon as they don't have aligned goals, they're going to start going at each other's throats.
oh,
They
okay, so it's
there's
like Stalin.
it's 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 five oligarchies fighting
Right.
for control.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, cool, cool. I'm on board.
All right.
I'm following.
So that's all I had written. I just thought we could talk about discussions about how to integrate it into Pathfinder or into Daggerheart, which I know a little bit about, but I'm not super up on the rules. Um,
Sure.
One thing I thought of is in Pathfinder specifically, there could be a really cool, interesting thing with animists, because animism probably would have been outlawed with druidism during the Shapers, and then it coming back would also be a pretty interesting thing. I'm also not sure, none of the player characters technically are clerics. I'm not sure if clerics are even a thing in Aramon. I know Pathfinder has the idea of like worshiping a concept and getting power from that. Like you can worship the plane of fire and get power from that. I'm not sure if that's a thing in Aramon, but you would. you wouldn't necessarily need it because even if you outlawed clerics in this campaign setting, there's animists and druids and celestial uh, sorcerers and oracles and witches. So you could have a pretty darn good, you know, divine healing base, even
Yeah.
if you don't have actual clerics.
Yeah, yeah. I think and probably the reason for that being that in D&D, the entire shtick of clerics is they get their powers directly through a god.
Hmm.
Um, people make a joke about warlocks being like the sugar babies of the magical world, but the reality is that's clerics. The clerics are literally like, money, please, and then they get their spells. Um, so I think it makes a lot of sense that there's no clerics. And then if they're trying to sort of feign divine power, it makes just as much sense that there are celestial sorcerers and divine warlocks, or sorry, divine soul sorcerers and celestial warlocks,
Hmm.
um, because both of those are like you have the hand-me-down powers of like a sort of someone who can like a warlock's patron can be a celestial being who's not a god.
Right.
And a celestial sorcerer, or sorry, divine soul sorcerer is also someone who and the thing that people get wrong about sorcerers is that it has to be something you're born with, when in reality you can be sort of like plain touched or something and somehow or another uh, be given this gift that becomes an innate part of you, but it doesn't
Um,
necessarily be something you're born with.
yeah, it is. So the Halavar character is a sorcerer because his father was that Azamar that the his grandmother made with a wish spell
Gotcha.
using reagents from the angel. But
I see.
it's implied that there are other like divine sorcerers that get their power from basically tattooing themselves with the like magic blood ink from the angel.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So I could totally see also why there's a bunch of ways you can make that in Pathfinder, but also, I mean, Pathfinder's whole thing is like you can kind of do anything.
Hmm.
There's like so much customizability that a lot of times even people coming from like other systems are overwhelmed by it, which is like a double-edged sword. But yeah, I think there's a lot of room to do that in Pathfinder. Um, I also I also think that if you have like an alignment with a certain house or something, or a certain what's the word I'm looking for? You know, some kind of faction in the
Hmm.
game. It's a really great way to introduce, or you could introduce them by doing some sort of like free archetype or some sort of feat tree. I
Yeah.
think that you can have certain. I know that they do this in Eberron with like certain. I think they're called like marks. Is the
The
feat
dragon marked houses, yes.
right, right, right? And so having some sort of like house aligned mechanic in Pathfinder during character customization, or sorry, character creation. Thank you very much. That you can incorporate something about what you are into the actual character itself, rather than just saying that. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I really was into the idea. So usually I was really into the idea of House Taconis being a good villain. That's kind of a fresh take because usually the wizards are the guys who are the bad guys, right? They're the elites who you have to pay for wizarding school, and only the nobles have enough money to do it. And then they have all these magic powers that the common people don't have. Reversing that and saying, no, it's the sorcerers that are on top because they're charismatic. They can swindle you out of, they can talk you into anything. They can swindle you out of stuff, and restricting it to only one family, whereas a wizard could theoretically be anybody that's smart enough. I think that's another really interesting way of doing things.
Yeah, I genuinely think that that's cool. And honestly, if you've ever heard Brennan Lee Mulligan talk about politics,
Oh yeah.
capitalism, anything like that, it's the idea that there's like a an inherently upper class people, you know,
Mm-hmm.
this sort of caste situation, And it's the idea that like we were born with it. We did nothing special to get it. We just have it, and we're lucky
and
enough to be here.
and we're better
And
than you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, we're better than you, and we don't like that there are other people that can do what we can do. We need to really, really hammer in that we are different, and that difference makes us better. And if there are other people that can do what we can do, that threatens us. It's
Yeah.
also
That's
very.
I actually
Go
just
ahead.
got done talking about the history of Oslant in Pathfinder, and that exact same thing happened. There was an entire nation that got like magical cheat codes from evil Cthulhu and Nightmare Fish,
Mhm.
and so like they were just like, oh, we're inherently better than everybody else, which that's true. They got an ability boost to all their ability scores instead of just two,
Yeah.
but they didn't do anything to earn it. It's just the
Right.
Algulthu happened to chose the Algulthu happened to choose those humans to genetically uplift, right? They didn't do anything.
Right. And that's I think that it's the idea that the difference, the gap, what makes them better or whatever, it is in large part like artificial,
Yeah,
right? So the idea that like here's the difference that makes us better, but then the fact that that difference could simply not exist if someone's smart enough. And I think that there's a lot of tones of like anti-intellectualism in
yeah,
this
yeah.
campaign world, um, which is also really interesting because we live in a society where we're like currently having book burning be like an issue again. um, there's people who are like decrying universities because they like, going to school longer makes people not want to vote a certain way. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Then now I'm completely seeing, as you were explaining it, I'm like, I get it now. I see what you're doing, Brendan Lee Mulligan.
Yeah.
It's so him coded. But I think that also, if we're talking about how we could translate this into other systems too, um, a
I'm
lot
not
of this. Oh,
I,
go ahead.
I'm not sure about Daggerheart. How do healers I know Daggerheart has a cleric-ish class. I think they're called seraphs. Is that right?
Well, get this. Daggerheart dissolved clerics.
Right.
There is so the way classes work in Daggerheart is aside from all your class and subclass abilities, each class has access to two domains.
Right.
So think of them kind of like if everyone had access to this sort of set of spells or spell
Right.
schools and stuff like that. And so it's like in the same way, there's like maybe there's a wizard who can use abjuration and conjuration.
Right.
But the thing is, it's shared even among the marshals as well. So there is a domain called the Splendor domain, and the Splendor domain is the one that has spells that are very similar to like Bolt Beacon, which is basically Guiding Bolt, which is just a radiant beam of
Right.
energy. And then there's also healing spells, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And the two classes that share that, they dissolved clerics because they said, clerics are basically just paladins who can't paladin as well, but also wizards who have some healing spells. And then
Right.
depending on the domain, like a lot of times clerics have like a bunch of wizard spells like fireball
Yeah.
anyway. So now,
Everybody loves the was it Saren Ray gives you fireball because
yep,
fire is one of her domains.
exactly. I mean, that's why I made myself a cleric of Saren Rain in one of my campaigns. So they put Splendor along
Mm-hmm.
with the Codex domain. Codex is the sort of thematically nerdy one.
Mm-hmm.
Codex like a book. They gave it to wizards. And now
Okay.
wizards are people who can do all the spells, and some of those spells are healing spells too. But then, and so that kind of is more of your cleric that's flavored like robes and stuff.
Okay.
And then you have or clergy people kind of, and then you have the seraphs who are the more paladin coded healers and stuff. They have a lot of abilities that make them more durable in battle. um, but I think it actually makes it fit even better because you're talking about a world without clerics but people who still have like divine abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think uh, a lot of people could definitely realize that as a wizard class, and then a lot of people can realize the alternative as like a seraph of some sort. Um, Especially the idea of people who are taking those abilities away from celestials and then repurposing them for themselves.
Yep.
Uh, but I think one of the reasons it works so well for Daggerheart is because when you start a campaign, the concept of a campaign frame is the idea that it's not just like here's what's common and here's the lore and stuff, but there are
Sure.
certain mechanics imposed, right? Or if you take this class, uh, part of the pitch is this is how things work for wizards, or this is how things work for seraphs or sorcerers. And I think there's even ways to homebrew certain things where maybe pull a card from another domain or something because you
Oh
have this
yeah,
quality to you. Um, so I think there's actually a lot of really interesting ways you could probably make a campaign frame out of that world.
yeah.
But I'm gonna pass it back to you because I've been here. I've been on the soapbox for so long.
No, it's good. I'm appreciative of your ideas. I thought it was a really interesting thing. The only other problem with converting it to Pathfinder is that Pathfinder explicitly their champions are do worship a god, as opposed to D&D paladins who just have, you know, sworn an oath so hard that it becomes real, right?
Yeah.
So you might have also have to nix champions or reflavor champions as the D&D version of a champion, a paladin, which is, you know, the oath is the thing, not the worship of a god.
Yeah, I've always thought it's interesting because I've always been a big flavor is free kind
Mm-hmm.
of person,
Yeah.
right? I had a fiend warlock in one of my campaigns who was like Taco Bell themed.
Oh yeah.
Um, so instead of Eldritch Blast, it was Baja Blast,
Oh
right?
god.
And you don't have to change the damage or the dice or the the stat that it's associated with, but you're just giving it a different name and saying if you were to see this right now, you'd see a like highlighter blue, green, or teal like beverage firing out of the palms of their hands, right? And so, it makes me feel like Pathfinder does this especially strongly in the fact that there's so much coded to certain like lore and narrative choices
Mm-hmm.
where every narrative choice has to be justified by some sort of mechanic and vice versa. But in the same way you were like, you might have to nix the class entirely or you could reflavor it. In my head, and maybe this is me being so loosey goosey that it's to my detriment here. But like why couldn't it be reflavored? And what stops that? And what mechanic would break the game if you were to say everything works the same, but the lore behind it is insert?
There's a couple mechanical things that you would need to work out, because champions get their uh whether they're aligned holy or unholy from their god, and kind of what choices they get for what subclass of champion they can be is from their god. So you'd have to do a little bit of finagling, but it wouldn't take more than 15 minutes to figure out.
I see what you're saying. So besides like all the feats and the spells you could choose or whatever, you're saying
Yeah.
that there's like a batch suite of certain mechanical features you get based on the choice of your god.
Yes. Same with clerics, same with a few others. So, but it's nothing insurmountable.
Yeah. Yeah, because in my head, I'm also thinking like, well, shoot, what happens when you play in a different world, right, with different gods?
You just have
Uh,
to you just have to come up with a stat block for the god, that's all.
and so in that case, I'm wondering, could, as an example, right? I'm not saying that this is the god we would choose, right? Could we say that rather than being a champion of Seirin Ray, you are a champion of House Draconis, and everything stays the same?
Um, yeah, if you want to be a champion of House Taconis and you were doing that kind of thing, it would be probably a champion of Pharasma, who's the goddess of death in Pathfinder. But yeah, you could
There
just
you
say,
go.
uh, instead of the goddess of death, you've made a vow to Taconis, use the same stats as Pharasma. Yeah, you could totally do that. It would be fun.
Yeah, and then in Daggerheart, I think again, flavor is free, right?
Hmm.
So I can see just if somebody was like a wizard who or like spellcaster like a wizard specifically who maybe specifically picks from the codex domain, like if they're trying to bind divine powers behind like basically like a paywall, right?
Hmm.
Then your wizards either have to be limited to the codex domain, or if they have splendor, then they have to explain how they got that from a house who's kind of like gridlocked that behind. You can't have these abilities unless you get our celestial blood tattoos that we
Right.
choose who gets them and stuff. In which case, there is a little bit of that mechanical and lore sort of feedback loop in a positive way where it's like, oh yeah, this plays into the story, and that could be really
Yeah.
fun.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. That's about all I had to talk about today. I really liked this campaign setting and I wanted to talk about it with someone and I thought it'd be nice and fun. I want my viewers to let me know what they think about Aramon. Also, go check out Nico's channel. Um, I I know that we've talked about some political stuff today, so I'm going to kindly ask for everybody to remain civil in the comments below. I will delete your comments. You have freedom of speech, but in my comment section, if you become uncivil, I'm going to delete you. You can go post your stuff in your own social media stuff.
And
Remember,
also, if you go out of your way to like brigade my channel because I said something, I'm telling you now, every time you comment somebody, even if it's a negative comment, you're just boosting our algorithm and giving us more power.
yeah. And also, in a little bit of a lighter note, remember there's another person on the other end of this computer screen. I personally have a Patreon. I'm going to try and post something fun there once a month, but it's just a way to keep this channel financially viable. Just a few bucks a month, and I'm toying with the idea of adding a limited higher tier where you can request a specific video. Let me know what you think. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That tells not only me, but also YouTube that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming.